Izuku Midoriya in this universe was born, or well, developed a quirk. Developed something that he didn't know at the time would allow him to be one of the greatest heroes, well, ever. Izuku Midoriya was only 4 years old when his mother took him to the doctor's office. When they arrived, he began getting a checkup, and his doctor began explaining everything that's going to occur.
We're gonna do a couple tests, young boy. Pretty simple. And then we should be able to evaluate exactly what your quirk is.
Izuku is visibly excited, and so is his mother. His mother is really hopeful that Izuku will have a great quirk. She sees how much, well, Izuku loves heroes, loves All Might, and loves just all hero society. And Izuku only talks about helping people, helping others the best he possibly can when he grows up and gets older. His mother, well, would love to see this, would love to see her young child with a smile on his face, just like All Might, saving everybody. Soon after the test, the doctor comes out and reveals that he does have a quirk.
Your son's quirk, it's pretty interesting. It seems that he has friction manipulation. And he may not know what this is, but I know you know, ma'am. Friction is obviously has to do with the resistance on a surface or an object. I'm not so sure how far Izuku will be able to, well, use this quirk, but for what it seems, if he can manipulate friction to its fullest extent, he may be able to do various things. He may be able to control other people's friction, making them, well, completely stand still and not be able to move. Maybe able to manipulate his friction, making it so he can run and move a lot quicker without much resistance at all. And various other things. Maybe even applying less friction to his movements, his arms, his punches. His hero journey could be very, very crucial to him. This could be one of the best quirks we've seen in a long time. His mother is visibly excited and super happy to hear this, and so is Izuku. He doesn't really understand what friction is exactly, but he does know that it's important and that, well, everything more or less has it. And when he's walking around, he's more or less having friction on his body. So when they arrive home, he begins trying to think of ways to basically use his quirk. He gets on the internet and basically starts learning about friction, physics, and other things like that. This would definitely lead to Izuku being more or less a nerd. He likes learning about stuff like this because it does relate to his quirk heavily. Eventually, this leads to, well, Izuku revealing his quirk to his classmates and obviously Kacchan. And Bakugo isn't really that impressed. He thinks that his quirk is obviously superior. Friction? What is friction anyways? Izuku is about to explain it, but Bakugo scoffs and says that it doesn't matter. Explosions are just so much better. But Izuku just rolls his eyes at this and says that it's just the same old Kacchan as usual. So, years go by. Izuku researches and studies his quirk as much as he possibly can, leading to him being very in-depth in science, math, and various other things that would help him with his quirk, while everyone else in his class doesn't really do much with their quirks. Izuku is curious about this too and even asks about it, but they say that they don't need to train their quirks, like that's for losers. They don't do that until they start hero school. But throughout the years, Izuku had the exact opposite mentality of this. His quirk was so unique, he wanted to learn everything he possibly could about it. Could he make himself into a human force field based on the friction in the air? Could he make air solid in a way where he can run on air itself? What could he do? How much could he manipulate? And he would find that out over the years, but will realize that there are limitations. There is a huge stamina drain on certain things he can do in terms of, well, manipulating friction in terms of running. He can actually crack an absolute constant velocity
But the thing is, there are some restraints. He still runs out of stamina. He'll need tons of stamina to even consistently run like this. Various other things as well. Making himself run faster is one thing, but keeping up with, well, food intake and his stamina is a big thing. He can feel his body slowly but surely adapting to it, but he's still more or less a normal human being. Running at insane speeds for over a mile would make him extremely tired. Pushing himself further and further, though, does help his quirk evolve, and he can even feel that, well, his body is, well, regulating itself. It's as if it's negating the hurt on his body. His manipulation of friction is also helping his bones, helping his muscles. It's as if the more he works out, the more, well, or the less effect it's having on his body, which he finds insane. So eventually he continues his training, obviously it's limited because he has school and other things like that, but he continues it, eventually leading to the last day of middle school. The last day of middle school then arrives, obviously, and, well, the teacher explains like normal. He throws the papers in the air and says that none of them will want to go the regular route of a regular job. So, they all want to be heroes. And everyone begins cheering besides, well, Izuku and Bakugo and, well, like a couple other people. But Izuku just sits there and waits for the teacher to continue. And the teacher continues, explaining that, well, Bakugo and Midoriya are actually trying for UA. Everyone thinks that Bakugo will get in for sure, but Midoriya, they're not so sure because, well, his quirk isn't so flashy. Izuku kind of laughs at this, and they ask what is he laughing about, and he says that that's a ridiculous idea. Just because a quirk isn't quote-unquote flashy doesn't mean that I can't make it. And the rest of them begin to scoff, but then he even says and reminds them that they're not even trying for UA, so they really aren't in a position to talk. And Bakugo kind of laughs at this and says that was a good one, Deku. Bakugo isn't really too big on Deku. He's not super friendly all the time with him, but he's not how he was in canon by any means. Izuku does have a quirk. It wouldn't be like Bakugo would be making fun of him all the time, so it wouldn't be too bad by any means. But don't get me wrong, they're not besties. Bakugo isn't nice to him by any means. He's not nice to anybody really, only nice to his so-called goon of friends, and he's not even very nice to them. So the teacher then tells them all to quiet down, and eventually leading to, well, the end of middle school. Finally, the next step for Izuku to become a hero. Now, the 10-month gap begins. But before that, something tragic begins to happen. Something insane. Izuku begins to walk home, and he begins hearing something from the far distance, screams, explosions, and other things like that. He begins to sprint over, and he sees a giant crowd of people watching on as this big villain has a young girl. She screams out, asking for help, as everything around them begins to float up and smash into the ground. She tries to struggle out of the sludge villain, but nothing is working. Izuku looks around to see if anybody's going to help, but nobody is. Nobody's even helping. He's confused. Where are the heroes? Why aren't the heroes helping? He looks to see that there are heroes, but they're not doing anything. Izuku is visibly mad by this. Maybe All Might will arrive. Maybe he remembers back. He remembers back to his mother talking to him about being a hero, about saving people, about if you have the power to save someone, why wouldn't you use it? Izuku remembers this, and it wasn't necessarily a lecture. It was just him hearing this from his mother meant so much to him. He solidified the idea of him wanting to be a hero for the right reasons. And immediately from the crowd, a giant bolt of lightning is seen, and he dashes out. Nobody can even see the boy move. He dashes out and immediately manipulates his friction, grabbing the girl, manipulating hers too, and sliding right past the sludge villain, right through his entire body. The sludge villain is confused, and Izuku is carrying the girl bridal style. Well, that was easier than I thought. Izuku smirks at the sludge villain, and the villain attacks them, but Izuku immediately dashes away and brings her to safety, putting her down, well, in a place where no one will see them and get attacked. And as he does this, he hears a giant Detroit Smash! All Might just arrived. But what Izuku doesn't know is that All Might decided to, well, do this because he saw the boy move, and, well, he could keep up with him somewhat, and at least when he saw him run. All Might is impressed that even though this boy didn't know if he can officially beat this person, beat this villain, he tried anyways. But let's go back to Izuku. He begins talking to the girl, and the girl says that she's fine and that she promises she's okay. Izuku nods and asks if she needs anything else, and she says no. And he's about to leave, but she asks what his name is. Izuku Midoriya. What's yours? She says that her name is Amora Shima, but Amora is just fine. You can call me Izuku then. I hope to see you very soon. Izuku dashes away before, well, anybody can get him in trouble, and he arrives back about 3 blocks away from his house and begins just walking normally. This obviously tired him out to a good little bit, nothing crazy, but he's definitely tired. And while he's walking, someone crashes down in front of him. I am here! Izuku is shocked. All Might, does he know? Did he realize that All Might then depowers down and just sighs. It doesn't matter. Kid, I saw what you did. Oh, I'm sorry, am I in? All Might cuts him off and says that he's not in trouble. Actually, quite the opposite. He's impressed that even with everyone cowering and everyone not knowing how to defeat that villain, Izuku, or he doesn't know his name, but Izuku was able to step in and fight no matter what, and made sure that this young lady was safe. Oh, thank you. So I'm not in trouble? No, you're not in trouble. I actually came to ask you something. Are you trying for UA? Yeah, actually, I'm trying for UA 100%. All Might smiles and says that he's glad to hear it. He does tell Izuku though to be careful using his quirk in public, and that he could get in trouble, but he won't be, well, telling anybody about what happened. But he does look forward to seeing Izuku at UA, and that he should be able to get in with his impressive quirk. Izuku bows and begins to realize who is actually standing in front of him. All Might himself. He slightly starts fanboying, but then eventually he gets an autograph signed and All Might heads off. Izuku, now with even more confidence, even more motivation to work hard, begins his 10-month journey of training anything he possibly can. And this training was very fruitful. He was able to do a lot of different things, in which he will show off in the UA entrance exam. And that's where we're leading to right now. The UA entrance exam then arrives, and Izuku arrives and sits down, and he sits right next to Bakugo, and eventually sees that same girl he saved 10 months ago walking into the room as well. He's interested at why she's here as well. Maybe her quirk is impressive too. And that's what we'll find out later as well. Izuku begins listening to President Mike, eventually leading to the written exam, in which he finds extremely easy. You gotta remember, Izuku has been interested in studies for a long time, being physics, science, and, well, physics, which is science, and various other things like mathematics. And Izuku just developed a love for learning, especially based on his quirk. So this test wasn't very difficult for him by any means, and this eventually led to the practical exam, in which President Mike began explaining President Mike began explaining that, well, there is a 1 point, a 2 point, 3 point robots, and there's also a 0 point robot that more or less they should just avoid for the time being because it doesn't give you any points. So Izuku then heads out to the gate. When he arrives, he sees that same girl. He begins to walk over to her, but this boy with blue hair stops him, saying that he will not let him sabotage her or anybody else here. Izuku's confused. Not here to sabotage anybody. I know who she is. I was going over to talk with her. Izuku slightly pushes the boy aside, and the boy by the name of Tenya Ida tries to grab his shoulder, but as he does, his fingers just slide right off, and he can't get a grip of Izuku at all. He walks over to the girl and taps her on the shoulder, and says that it's good to see her again. She turns and she's surprised, and actually immediately hugs him out of reaction, and he's kind of shocked by this, but he says and asks how she's been, and she says that she's been good and that he ran off before they can even exchange contact information, so they should definitely do that after this. Izuku slightly smiles and says that they definitely will. So the practical then begins. Izuku immediately races out as the gates swing open, and a lot of people call him a cheater. But over the intercom, President Mike says that he isn't cheating, he's actually doing the right thing. There is no countdowns in a real battle. And Izuku is out in front already, at insane speeds, dashing around everywhere, destroying robots by just running through them. He's manipulating his friction to a point where he's extremely fast, running 200, 300 miles per hour, but also can change and manipulate the friction so he can control his movement perfectly. He just rips through tons and tons of robots until he feels comfortable. Izuku already destroyed plenty enough to pass and begins just to wait. He doesn't want to destroy all of them, then what about the other students? So he just currently waits until the test is over. But with 30 seconds left, he begins feeling everything shaking. Everything begins to move like crazy. He looks up to see a giant robot. A giant robot that is about to crush another student. Crush someone by the name of Ochako Uraraka, someone that's already stuck under rubble. Izuku immediately dashes toward her. He basically manipulates her friction, sliding her out of the rubble, and immediately gets her to safety and turns toward the robot, trying to slow the robot down, making the robot's friction basically immovable, making the robot trying to make the robot stand still and not move. And he's able to do that, but he's struggling. His arms are shaking, and he can feel his arms like close to the edge of breaking. Eventually, someone comes flying out of nowhere. It's Amora, and she immediately looks at the robot, picking the robot up, but not physically. She's able to manipulate gravity around the robot as the friction is keeping it in place, making it easier for her, slamming the robot to the ground, destroying it. Izuku then releases the friction manipulation upon the robot and sighs. Okay, I'm tired now. Izuku looks up to see her and she comes to the ground. She asks if Izuku is alright, and he says that he's just fine. And he kinda starts laughing about the fact that she got captured, but her quirk seems to be better than his. And Amora shakes her head, saying that it's not. She actually started training really hard after, he saved her. He smiles at this and nods and says that maybe they'll both have to train really, really hard so that they can be good heroes. And Izuku then hears the intercom come back on and say that the test is now over, and that if anybody's hurt, please go to Recovery Girl. So he heads out and begins leaving, but Amora catches up with him, saying that, they forgot to exchange info once again, and that's what they do. They exchange numbers and contact information, and then Izuku heads home. Weeks go on by, and finally the letter from UA arrives, and he gets a text from Amora, and she says that she got in as well, and she's in class 1A. And he begins to check, and he sees a hologram appear of All Might himself, All Might begins praising the boy, praising Izuku for how good he did, saying that he was very impressive. 105 villain points or robot points, and then on top of that 80 rescue points because of, well, saving that girl and keeping the robot from hurting anybody else with, well, his other friend. Izuku smiles, and then All Might breaks the news that he got number 1 in the entrance exam, and he'll be joining Class 1A as the class representative. Izuku is shocked by this as the hologram turns off. His mother is eavesdropping or listening from outside the room and runs in and hugs him, and they both celebrate. They both celebrate the fact that Izuku is starting this hero journey at the top, starting it with a head start. Izuku Midoriya is now the class rep for Class 1A and is ready to take that role by storm. Eventually, time passes and the first day of UA arrives. He enters the classroom and sees Amora, and they sit down together and begin talking, eventually leading to, well, Aizawa, their teacher, entering, saying that, well, they have a couple things to do. He wants them to all introduce themselves, and then they will begin, in which they do just that, very simply, and they introduce themselves and their quirks. Izuku introducing himself as Izuku Midoriya, and that his quirk is friction manipulation, in which some of the smart people like Momo Yaoyorozu begin asking tons of questions, but Izuku tries his best to explain, but even says himself that he's still studying up on his quirk currently. Amora then goes up as well, and she introduces herself as Amora Shima, and saying that her, well, quirk is gravity manipulation. And everyone is shocked and saying that they have 2 people in the class that can manipulate forms of, well, physics and other things of the universe. And Izuku just shrugs, saying that it will be very helpful, in the future. Aizawa then watches them all finish up and eventually tells them all to head out for a quirk assessment test, in which when they arrive, Izuku is set to go first. Aizawa then explains, "Since you got first in the exam, I want to see what you got, like, in reality here, not just some destroying robots." Izuku smiles and walks up, grabbing the ball and gets ready to throw it. "So throw it as far as possible using my quirk, right?" Aizawa nods and begins to think that this kid has something up his sleeve. He makes the ball frictionless, throwing the ball as hard as possible, and then puts his hand out, making the air resistance practically nothing. The ball goes soaring. But behind it is as if, well, a foothold. These footholds begin appearing, and it's as if the friction begins to eliminate as the ball goes through the air, but begins to reappear behind the ball, pushing the ball even further. It's as if Izuku is solidifying the air and making it so that it pushes the ball as if it was going through frictionless water, and a wave of air keeps hitting it further and further. Eventually Izuku is, well, kind of tired, so he stops. 10,000 meters. Now that is something. Very creative way to use your quirk, kid. Go back in line. Everyone begins to celebrate, saying that this is going to be so much fun, but even Izuku knows that there's a catch. There's always a catch with stuff like this, and he looks at Aizawa as Aizawa smirks, hearing everyone saying that this is going to be like some game. "Oh, so you think this is fun? How about this? Whoever gets last place will be expelled." Everyone is shocked and says that he can't do that. "Okay, I can't do that, you're right. How about this? Everybody that gets in the bottom half of the class gets expelled." Everybody's even more shocked, but doesn't say a word, thinking that Aizawa will make this punishment even worse. And Izuku just smiles, knowing that this will definitely be the first challenge in, well, his hero journey. So, we start where we left off. Aizawa tells the class that whoever gets in the bottom half on this quirk assessment will be going home, aka will be expelled So their quirk assessment begins. After everybody does the ball throw, everyone begins their, race test. Izuku is lined up with Bakugo, who was also a top student in the entrance exam. But this isn't even fair. Izuku easily beats Bakugo by a mile. It's not even funny that he's able to manipulate his friction to the point where he can make it so that he's frictionless, but then actually has friction every so often in his feet. It's like how Mirio's quirk works. He can make sure that certain parts of his body become, more or less untouchable and more or less like phasing. Izuku can do something very similar. He makes it so that the ground is frictionless, but he makes it so that when he steps, part of it has friction, just less of it. So he can still lift off and push off of things, and make sure that he can gain speed faster and faster and faster, in which he can do very well. He can run at insane speeds, faster than Ida, faster than anybody really in the class, and it's not even really close. So he gets ranked number 1 in that category as well, in which he gets ranked number 1 in most of them. So Izuku then, obviously passes, getting ranked number 1 in the entire quirk assessment, with Amora and Bakugo in a close second and third, and then obviously the rest of the class. The rest of the class is shocked and is terrified at the fact that they could be expelled right now, and they really don't want to be. So they begin begging Aizawa, please don't expel us, but Aizawa kind of smirks.
That was just a logical ruse to make you try your hardest. Just don't annoy me with this whole "it's gonna be fun" stuff.
Everyone is shocked. Izuku kind of laughs, and so does Amora, and Bakugo doesn't really care. He didn't really expect himself to get in the bottom half of the class, and frankly, same with Izuku and Amora. They were never going to get bottom half of the class. So their stress was really never present. So the class is then dismissed. They go to orientation, finally, obviously being very late to it, and then the day is over. The next day, though, they will start, truly training, and Aizawa begins to explain that.
Okay, listen up. It's pretty simple. We're gonna be doing hero training, and actually someone else will be doing this hero training for you.
Izuku is confused and wonders who this could be, until a giant man comes crashing through the door.
I am here, walking through the door like a normal person.
All Might. It's All Might. Izuku met All Might not too long ago after saving Amora, and he was very impressed with Izuku. Actually, All Might considers making him his successor, but he's not so sure yet. He doesn't know too much about the boy, just knows that he definitely has a heart of a hero, but he doesn't know if he truly needs One for All. So he puts that aside for now, and he'll more or less talk to him about it later. So All Might tells them all to meet him at Ground Gamma, and in which Izuku has a very similar outfit as normal. He wouldn't really decide to change much. Anything wouldn't really make a difference. He could wear anything he really wanted. He could wear beach attire and he'd be just fine in his quirk, because he could manipulate friction entirely. It's not like he's going to burn up or overexert certain things where he'll catch on fire or something, but he does decide to have a nice face mask and his normal gloves and stuff like that. So they arrive at All Might. And All Might begins explaining that they're going to be doing something similar to what they normally would do, but he wants to see what their quirks are like. So he'll have them face off in a 1 versus 1 tournament, or more like just 1 versus 1. And if you win, then you get congrats, and if you lose, then you will have to try harder next time. So that begins.
Okay, who would like to go first?
Izuku raises his hand and says that he doesn't mind going first, and if anybody wants to face him, he'll go right ahead for it. Todoroki also raises his hand and says that he wants to get this over with, so he'll go as well. So they both face off in the middle of the streets, and they begin to stare each other down. Izuku gets into a running stance. trying to, well, it seems to bait Todoroki in to thinking that it's going to be a frontal assault. So, All Might counts them down.
3, 2, 1, go!
Izuku immediately charges at him, and Todoroki sends a giant iceberg at him, more or less, and he thinks that it's over. There's no way Izuku would have got through that. No way at all. But the thing is Izuku is just fine. Izuku actually is vibrating his body currently insanely fast, making sure that he has no air friction at all or air resistance, so that he can vibrate his body faster than he can normally run, and he's able to phase entirely through the wall of ice and immediately is in front of Todoroki, punching him in the stomach and then kicking him back into another building. Everyone is shocked. Everyone is in awe at what Izuku just did. What kind of powers does he have? What else can he do? How much has he been training and working on this? Amora kind of jumps and floats for a bit and claps her hands, saying that that's really impressive. And everyone stares at her, thinking that, well, they must be, well, something together. But Amora basically shakes her head really fast in embarrassment, saying that that's not the case. He just saved her a long time ago. All Might looks back and actually confirms this, but makes it seem that Izuku was completely under the law and able to use his quirk in that situation, making it so that, oh, he didn't actually, well, hurt or even touch the sludge villain. He just saw Amora in trouble, grabbed her and ran off. So that's why he saved her. And everybody kind of buys this, which is kind of odd, thinking that Izuku's practically one of the fastest people on planet Earth and could have easily dashed into a villain and, well, got her out. But that's not the point. The fight continues on, and Todoroki is completely baffled by this, shocked that he's able to just phase through his ice. How could he even stop him? So the goal of Todoroki is to touch Izuku one time. If he can, he should be able to freeze him over, and he should be able to win the fight, at least theoretically. So Izuku charges in once again and begins beating on Todoroki, and Todoroki looks for this one opening, eventually getting it, tapping the side of his foot and more or less freezing Izuku over. But that doesn't work. Izuku begins to shake like crazy, and well, his feet begin to shake as well on the ground, and fire begins to emerge around him. Todoroki is shocked by this, asking if he has two quirks, and Izuku says that his friction manipulation allows for him to turn friction into heat, heat into fire. There's a lot of things he can do, and he can manipulate the air just as much because of this friction. Friction is everything, Todoroki. Friction can be used in many ways. Quickly, Izuku smashes his foot into the ground, and it blasts a giant heat wave toward Todoroki, and Izuku dashes in as he dodges, grabbing his face and slamming him to the ground. Todoroki is now knocked out, and Izuku is deemed the winner. All Might announces it.
Izuku Midoriya is the winner, and please, Izuku, bring him to Recovery Girl.
Izuku picks up Todoroki and dashes away in an instant and brings him to Recovery Girl, immediately going in and setting him on the bed before Recovery Girl could even really see him. He dashes back to the class, and All Might is explaining everything Todoroki did wrong, Izuku did wrong, and what they all did, or what they both did right. All Might is shocked when he sees Izuku already back, asking if he will put Todoroki in Recovery Girl's office, and he nods. All Might realizes that the kid is really fast, so it does make sense. So everyone else goes about their, well, normal fighting until you actually get to Amora. Amora is up next, but she also has to face one of the stronger people there, Katsuki Bakugo, one of Izuku's best, well, friends, I would say. They were best friends when they were kids, but obviously they were just, mutuals now because he has a quirk. So the fight begins, and Bakugo begins on the offensive, but Amora is able to stop him really quickly with her gravity manipulation. But Bakugo, using his explosions, is able to use this to his advantage and tries to, well, use the floating aspect of her gravity against her, in which she realizes this and then makes his gravity 3 times stronger,
he collapses to the ground and cannot move. The thing is she can't hold this for very long. She hasn't trained like Izuku has. Izuku has basically can do so much with his friction manipulation because of how much he trained and how much he trained his body. For her, she's just has her quirk and hasn't done much training, and even Izuku can realize this, watching as she can hold Bakugo still for only about 15 seconds until he gets up. But the thing is being under immense pressure like that, 3 times gravity, puts a strain on your body. It's as if, let's say Bakugo was 150 pounds, it's as if he was, well, 450 pounds. So Bakugo is able to recover, landing a blow on Amora, sending her backwards, but she's able to slow herself down using her gravity manipulation. She begins to float herself and flies at Bakugo, landing a punch solid in his face and picking him up, throwing him into the air, and immediately activating her gravity manipulation, multiplying his weight by 10 times. He comes crashing down to the ground, and Bakugo is out cold. Amora collapses to the ground as well, and Izuku dashes over and puts basically his leg right by her head as she leans on it. You did good. It's impressive. Amora smiles and just passes out with Bakugo. All Might then deems it as more or less a double KO, because frankly Amora overexerted herself with her quirk and Bakugo was just straight up knocked out. So Izuku is told to take them both to Recovery Girl, and that since they were the last match, they're allowed to be dismissed. So that's what happens. Izuku takes them over and he waits for Recovery Girl to to say that Amora and Bakugo are good. More Amora than Bakugo, but same thing. So Izuku waits there, and Amora eventually wakes up and thanks him for, helping her get to Recovery Girl and making sure that she was okay. He says that that's what friends are for, and he goes to leave, and Amora thanks him once again. Izuku heads home, tells his mother about his day and how it was just, amazing. And then the next day arrives, and when he arrives at school, Aizawa is waiting for them and begins explaining, what they're going to be doing now. He begins explaining that after their normal curricular activities and all their academic things, they will actually be going to something known as the USJ. Everyone begins asking what the USJ is, and he explains.
The USJ is a rescue facility. It's pretty simple actually, but a pro hero will be waiting for us.
Everyone begins to get excited at the aspect of another pro hero being there too, and people ask if All Might will be there as well, and Aizawa says that he's not sure, at least not right now. So eventually, the students head off to the USJ on a bus, in which they all begin talking about who they think has the strongest quirks, and so on and so forth. People argue Bakugo, people argue Izuku, others argue Amora, and even Todoroki to a certain extent, even though he doesn't show his fire powers. But Izuku just points at Amora, saying that her, gravity manipulation is a little more effective than his, in his opinion. And she slightly blushes, saying that that's not true. Izuku has so much more, control over his power. And Izuku rolls his eyes and says that they're asking who has the strongest quirk, not the best control. And Izuku just continues on talking with his class and, just really getting to know everybody else as well. Eventually, they arrive at the USJ, in which they're actually greeted by Pro Hero 13. And a couple people like Ochako Uraraka and even Amora say that they're pretty big fans. Even Izuku is a fan. He loves everything to do with all heroes, so he actually is pretty psyched to see her as well, in which she says that she thanks all of them for their support, in which they all walk in and she begins explaining about the USJ and what they'll be doing. That there's different environments, different places, different areas in the entire world that you'll need to be adapted and ready for. If someone is, drowning in a lake, you need to be ready for that. If someone is stranded in the desert, you need to be ready for that. If there's a building collapsing, you need to be ready for that. And they all nod as she continues explaining, and they begin walking through the USJ until, a portal opens at the fountain,
Everybody asks if that's fake villains, and that's pretty cool, but that's not the case. These villains are not fake, they're real, very real. And Izuku even knows this immediately and says that they all need to get out of here. Aizawa looks to Izuku and says that he needs to go get help now. And he tells Pro Hero 13 to well protect the students. Izuku goes and starts running away, and Kurogiri then approaches in front of him. But that doesn't matter. He phases through and he's able to get by Kurogiri, in which he's surprised and begins thinking that this kid's quirk may be impressive as well. But Izuku is gone. He goes racing at insane speeds down the little roadway that's there. Way faster than a bus would ever go. And finally he arrives at a UA once again. Pretty quick actually. It only took him about 25 seconds to do that. He arrives and he begins telling all the teachers and Nezu everything that's happening. Nezu says that he'll contact All Might and all these other pro heroes to basically siege back in which he tells Izuku not to move and that he should stay here, that it's safe here. Izuku hears this but doesn't care. Immediately he's gone once again, and Nezu facepalms. Yeah, I've heard about you. You definitely are interesting. Izuku is gone just as fast as he went over there, and he's back at the USJ. 13 is currently fighting Kurogiri, but everyone else is teleported away, and she screams out to Midoriya asking if he warned the other teachers, and he nods, saying that everyone else is on their way right now. She says that he should have stayed there, that it's safer, but even he ignores her as well, dashing down toward Aizawa, standing next to him. You know, you could use some help. We'd be finished immediately. Kid, I know you're impressive, but you shouldn't be fighting in this. You're just a... As he says this, Izuku dashes around, knocking out all the minor villains, more or less all of them, except for the 3 that Aizawa has in his scarf. Aizawa looks at Izuku and just rolls his eyes. Okay, never mind. He knocks out the last 3, and all the villains are immediately out cold. Izuku more or less just sprinted around, pushing them over, and the speed that he was going at, he more or less made them all just hit the ground really hard. And that's more or less how they all passed out or got knocked out. Shigaraki starts scratching his neck, saying that was too quick, that this kid, he doesn't understand what fire he's playing with. The fire that I'm playing with, huh? Izuku begins to vibrate his body and sends a giant heat wave toward Kurogiri and Shigaraki. But as he does this, something blocks it. Some giant monster, other known as a Nomu. Basically, the Nomu is standing in front of Shigaraki, blocking the heat wave, and Shigaraki commands the Nomu to go smash the brat's head in. His eyes grow wide and sees the Nomu charge at him, but the Nomu's too slow. He might be fast to everyone else, but Izuku is faster. He grabs Aizawa and dashes Aizawa up to the top of the staircase and tells him that Nomu is out of brute strength, way too strong. And Aizawa cancels the Nomu's quirk and even says that the Nomu seems to have multiple quirks. I see. Well then, I think we just stall for All Might then, right? Aizawa nods, and Izuku goes dashing back at the Nomu. Actually, Izuku is able to just run around the Nomu, run laps around the Nomu, but once he gets tired, he runs away. The Nomu sees this as a chance, and so does Shigaraki, to close the distance on Izuku. But the Nomu is frozen in place. He can't move. Why can't he move? Todoroki blasted ice at its feet, and on top of that, Izuku is controlling his friction, making it so that the friction underneath him is so strong, he can't even take a step. Izuku basically is holding him still, but asks Todoroki to spray more ice, that he won't be able to hold him here forever. So Todoroki does just that, keeping the Nomu still for about a minute straight, and Shigaraki gets frustrated by this, charging at Izuku, but quickly Amora enforces gravity upon Shigaraki, forcing him to the ground. Kurogiri realizes that this is bad,
But as he goes to make a move, Bakugo is able to grab his metal body, blasting it, keeping him where he is, and every time he moves, he begins blasting the metal. Shigaraki realizes that these kids, they underestimated them, that he came in unprepared. Eventually, All Might comes soaring through the door.
There's no need to fear because I am here.
Izuku screams out to him that there's no time for a catchphrase, that he has his opening, he needs to take his punch, and All Might sees the Nomu and goes for it.
Detroit Smash!
All Might smashes the Nomu's face into the ground and it tears off his legs. He begins bashing the Nomu, making sure that the Nomu is defeated. Eventually, the Nomu is, and Shigaraki is immediately injured by Bakugo and Amura, basically using both of their quirks. The rest of the heroes then that were not far behind All Might come in as well, going to detain them, but unfortunately Kurogiri is able to get both of them out of there. But the hero students were able to show how strong they truly were. But this wouldn't be necessarily good. Now with the League of Villains knowing how strong these students are, knowing how strong Izuku is, will this affect them in the future? Will it hurt Class 1A coming very soon? And will the League of Villains get more information about these students? Are any of them safe? Are they ever truly going to be safe with Shigaraki, All for One, and Kurogiri, and whatever Nomus and constructions they make are to come? Well, I guess we'll have to find out next time.
The USJ is now over. The thoughts of, well, villainy run rampant within UA now. So they decide to, well, give the students a small break to see if they can fortify, well, UA a little bit more. But there's some things that are coming up. Some things that will show these villains that they're not done yet. That they're not going to lie down and just, well, give up. Not at all. After their small break, the UA Sports Festival is announced. Izuku is actually the class representative for the UA Sports Festival, and after all the classes are called to the field, he walks up to give his speech. He begins saying that he knows that this time right now is a struggle. Some students may be afraid, some may be, well, more motivated than ever, and he's part of the latter. He wants to motivate himself, his classmates, and everyone else to push themselves to the point where they know they can defeat any villain that stands in front of them. But for now, they're gonna show off their abilities and, well, have fun doing it, and that he hopes everyone enjoys. Everyone begins cheering on and he runs back down. Amura says that it was an amazing speech, and Bakugo kinda scoffs, saying that he would have done it better if he got first. Izuku kinda smiles and says, well, you didn't get first. Maybe try harder next time.
What'd you say to me, you damn nerd?
Izuku continues to laugh, and so does Amura, and, well, the wheel is then began to get spun by, well, pro hero Midnight. They waited for it to land, and finally it did. And the first thing that came up was an obstacle course race. A large smirk grew over Izuku's face, thinking that this will be, well, very, very easy. And frankly, he's right. With his quirk, it is perfect for this type of race. So they all line up and get ready to go, and when Midnight counts them down and allows them to run, they all run to a corridor in which, well, Shoto Todoroki, the son of Endeavor himself, covers the entire place in ice. Izuku can easily get out of this though. Everything, he controls friction entirely. He's not gonna be slipping, he's not gonna be stuck, and he'll be right by Todoroki while everyone else is more or less stuck in place for at least a couple seconds. Izuku is keeping up with Todoroki, and they're kind of battling for first place initially, but Izuku smiles and sees a giant robot ahead and says that he thinks it's time for him to pull away. Izuku goes sprinting as fast as possible, zooming past the robot, and actually chops both the robot's legs, more or less stunning the robot using a manipulation of friction, tripping the robot. This forces the other contestants to more or less slow down by a good amount. Izuku keeps going and eventually gets to this giant ravine in which he literally just runs over. He makes more or less small pockets of air and he just runs on top of them, eventually getting past the ravine to a giant minefield, in which, unfortunately for the story, is kind of boring. I mean, frankly, Izuku manipulating friction here is the least of it. He can just run straight over it. He's very fast, and frankly, if he wanted to truly, he could step over it using the same thing he did with the ravine, and it would be very, very simple. So, Izuku gets first place in the obstacle course race by a long shot. Everyone else proceeded to finish up, and Izuku was, well, just there waiting, eventually leading to the spin of the wheel one more time. And when it spins, it actually lands on something called Capture the Flag. Capture the Flag deals with 4 different flags. Every flag is more or less a ticket to the next round. And well, if you have one of those flags, you have the ticket. But if you have all of them, you automatically win the UA Sports Festival. Midnight continues to explain, and everyone gets ready. The flags are placed in the 4 flags are placed in the very center of the arena, and she counts them down. 1, 2, 3, go! They all race after the flags, and Izuku quickly is able to grab one, and well, so is Amora. Shoto Todoroki sends his ice at the rest of the people to grab one as well, with Bakugo not too far behind, blasting forward to grab one. But that's the easy part. Now is the hard part, maintaining the flag as long as possible. Well, Izuku decides to run around for a bit, just avoiding people as much as possible, trying to just maintain his flag. He has a plan for the last about 2 minutes of the event, but he wants to make sure he doesn't tire himself out immediately. So he tries his best to basically maintain his speed, friction, and other things like that, because his manipulation of, well, obviously friction does have a toll on his body. He has certain ways of getting around it, but to a certain extent, it really drains his stamina. So he just avoids people as much as possible. That's until he hears someone talking right behind him. You know, your quirk is interesting, Izuku Midoriya. Very interesting. Izuku dashes away and actually responds to the voice, but immediately falls under a deep, well, it seems like stasis, and he can't move. He can hear his own thoughts, but he can't really do anything. It's all a blur. He hands the flag over to the boy by the name of Shinso, and Shinso smiles. But luckily, Izuku knows this boy's quirk now. He just needs to somehow break free of this mind control. And this would occur very quickly. Amora comes flying down out of nowhere and bumps into Izuku and slaps the back of his head. Izuku immediately jolts awake as if that's all it took for him to get out of the mind control. Amora smiles and flies away, saying that don't say that she's never done anything for him. He smiles back and he dashes back at Shinso. Shinso, not realizing Izuku is currently out of the mind control or the brainwashing, he gets the flag taken away from him instantly. Midoriya looks at him and basically puts his fingers over his lips, saying that there's no more talking, that his quirk is not useful anymore. Midoriya decides that it's time to, well, take matters into his own hands, so he basically makes solid air above him, jumping on top of it all the way until he was safe, and he makes a small seat in the sky and sits there. He remarks to himself that this is the boring way of going about it, but sometimes you have to do what you gotta do. And eventually leading to Izuku, well, passing through the capture the flag event. Amora also passes Katsuki Bakugo, and that's it. Actually, Bakugo took it upon himself to make sure that he had 2 flags. He wanted to prove to Izuku and, well, this other girl that he was the strongest, that he should have been the class representative, and that everything up to this point has been luck. Bakugo is stronger than both of them, and he'll prove it right now. Midnight begins saying that she loves the determination, and that just for the sake of, well, Bakugo, they'll do a free-for-all. 1 versus 1 versus 1 for the winner of the UA Sports Festival. Everybody begins to cheer, and after a small break, the 3 of them are standing on the stage facing each other. Izuku knows the threats. He knows how strong Bakugo is, and frankly, Amora could eliminate them instantly if she had perfect control over her quirk. Izuku is trying to brainstorm ways of going about this. How should he defeat them? What is the easiest, fastest, and most effective way of going about this? And who will be their main target, or his main target? The countdown begins, and Midnight tells them to fight. Izuku immediately dashes toward Amora, tapping her on the shoulder, freezing her more or less in place, immediately sky kicking Bakugo, but Bakugo knew this was coming. He knew that he would try to, well, nullify the quirk of more or less Amora and then eliminate Bakugo quickly, but Bakugo knew what was about to happen. He quickly blasts himself sideways, dodging Izuku, crashing back into him. Bakugo punches him in the face and blasts him in the chest, remarking that if he can keep the fight close, Izuku won't win. Izuku smiles and begins to dodge, asking where he believes that. Izuku hits him in the chest with a punch and then sweeps him. Out of nowhere, Bakugo begins sliding. He can't control it, but as he's about to basically be pushed out of bounds, he blasts himself back in, kicking Izuku, using his frictionless body at the moment to, well, propel himself at insane speeds. Izuku is flung out of the ring, but luckily he's able to catch himself and gets a foothold mid-air with more or less solid air. Amora then breaks free of this, well, frictionful state and attacks Izuku, making it so the gravity begins to be super intense on him while he's trying to get his foothold mid-air outside the ring. He tries to pressure himself back up and can't get it. He can't. He's holding on for practically dear life at this point. Bakugo sees an opportunity, blasting himself over, and tries to blast Izuku downward, and he does just that. But he left himself vulnerable to the gravity manipulation by Amora. She quickly makes his gravity insanely powerful, slamming Bakugo out of bounds, in which she believes she just won. But when Izuku crashed to the ground, he solidified the air right above it and was able to save himself just in time. Immediately, sparks, lightning, and everything around them begins to shake. He gets on one knee and smirks. Friction manipulation. Godspeed. Izuku is immediately in front of Amora, and he immediately kicks her out of the ring, and she's barely able to save herself. But the speed of Izuku is immense. He's immediately above her while she's out of bounds and kicks her down. She pushes as hard as possible so that she can keep herself from hitting the ground, but Izuku is, well, there once again in an instant, kicking her at the wall, and she falls on the ground as he jumps back to the ring. He collapses from pain because, well, he's only used this in training. He's never used it at full force, and frankly, he's only used it for a single attack. But it doesn't matter. Izuku Midoriya is announced the winner of the UA Sports Festival. But Izuku realizes something. The gap that he thought was so wide between everybody in his class, the fact that he thought that he was that far ahead of everybody else made him complacent. Everybody else must have been training. Bakugo, Amora, and frankly, even Todoroki. He knows that he didn't make it this far, but he can tell the determination in Todoroki's eyes. The USJ made them into better heroes, and he realized that he would need to try his best to keep up with his class before he would fall behind. But with that thought in mind, All Might congratulates them for, making the top 3 of the UA Sports Festival, with Izuku at number 1, Amora at number 2, and Bakugo at a close number 3. He scoffs, saying that he'll make sure to get number 1 next time, but he doesn't even throw a fit. He's actually more determined than ever. He might be behind right now, but he won't be behind forever. He'll push himself to the limit, push himself to the point where he'll be stronger than everybody in this school. And the entire crowd cheers all 3 of them on, saying that it was one amazing battle. The day is then over, and the next day then arrives, and Aizawa begins explaining to them what is to come. He begins explaining something by the name of internships. Listen up. Internships are complicated. Everything you did in the UA Sports Festival matters now. So, let's keep that in mind. Now here are the people that got the most out of everybody. Aizawa shows that Shoto actually got number 1, Izuku with a close second, Amora, then Bakugo, and then everyone else kind of peters off from there. And Aizawa explains that they will have till the end of the day to choose where they want to go. Choose where they want to spend their internships. In which Izuku is excited about this. He's not sure who he wants to go to quite yet, but he knows that he should go to someone that will benefit him the most. What is his biggest weakness? What does he personally need to, bring his game to the next level? He begins looking through all his requests, searching more and more until he finds it. He finds the exact person he wants to go to. And she is very strong in her own right. He marks it down and gives it to Aizawa, and Aizawa smirks, saying that he knows his own strengths and weaknesses, and that this should push him over the next hump, you could say. Izuku nods, and Amora turns, hers in as well, and Aizawa looks at her. This is an interesting choice. It's actually the same as your buddy over here. Izuku looks at her, and she asks if he chose Mirako as well, and he nods, saying that he needs to work on his hand-to-hand combat, that it's lacking, or at least according to him. Raw speed and, more or less just techniques won't be just enough. His manipulation of friction could be, 10 times stronger if he knew more martial arts and how to use his legs more properly. Amora says that he does just fine, but Izuku says that all of that is just based on stuff he's seen, but nothing is technically flawless. That's what he wants from Mirako. He wants a sense of perfection. This idea that he could not use his quirk and kick somebody in the face properly. He kind of laughs about this, and Aizawa more or less nods at both of them. After some time passes, they're allowed to, head home. But the next day will be an important one. The day they head to their internships. And when that day arrives, Amora and Izuku head over together. And when they arrive at the internship, they are greeted by Pro Hero Mirako. And she immediately tells them that it's time for training, that she's seen the sports festival and she was impressed, but they lack the combat skills they need to take their hero work to the next level. And if they want to be true pro heroes, that's what matters. So Mirko begins to train them in any martial arts she knows and her fighting style in general. And Izuku is able to mimic this very well, actually extremely well, and he realizes that this is very helpful for him. Amora is struggling a little bit more than Izuku. Obviously, she doesn't have as much training as Izuku went through, but she begins getting the hang of it. After some time, Mirko feels comfortable with where they're standing. She then tells them that it's time to, well, take their training to the next level, and that they'll be heading to Hosu City for some hero patrols. And well, if danger is to come, she expects them to be on their toes and ready for a fight. They both nod and agree with her, so they take the nearest bus and head over. They both ask why they don't just take one of her personal cars, but she says that that's lame and that interacting with people is part of the job. They all agree, or both of them agree, and they head over to Hosu City. When they arrive, everything seems normal. That's until screams can be heard in the distance, and a massive fire breaks out. This isn't good. This is not what they expected. Hosu City was supposed to be a patrol for them to learn, but this is throwing them directly into the fire. Luckily though, Izuku and Amora have quirks that are built to more or less save people at insane speeds. Amora has a gravity quirk that she can more or less float people out of the way, and Izuku obviously can manipulate friction in a way that he can speed people in and out of certain situations, so this is extremely helpful. But during this entire sequence, Izuku realizes something. He hears something in a nearby alley and even speaks to Mirko about it, saying that there's something going on right over there. He points toward it and Mirko begins to investigate with them as they hear a voice that would instill terror into many, a voice that would scare people away as soon as they heard it. He has a blade within someone's, well, back of their neck, and ended 2 pro heroes' lives. Or at least that's what Izuku thought initially, until he saw the face of the boy that he was standing on. The hero killer Stain had a blade in the back of Tenya Ida's neck, the boy that was part of his class. Izuku immediately dashed forward and Mirko called out to him saying to not make a move, but Izuku wasn't listening anymore. He didn't want to see anybody else, frankly, get hurt. He immediately kicked Stain in the guts, sending him flying at basically insane speeds because of how fast he was running. Mirko decided to, well, take this advantage, kicking Stain while he's in the wall and injuring him badly. Stain wasn't necessarily expecting this and wasn't necessarily expecting the speed of Izuku Midoriya. Stain tries to stand up and fight, but as he charges forward, Amora uses her gravity manipulation, slamming him to the ground as Mirko finishes him off with a kick to the head. Izuku looks at Stain's unconscious body and is sad. He's sad that they couldn't get here sooner. He's so fast. He is extremely quick, but how could he let this happen? When things like this happen and you're fast enough to stop it, is it your fault? Izuku's been thinking this for a while. He's saved Amora, dashed in, grabbed her out of the harm's way, but he wasn't able to save Tenya. He wasn't able to save one of his other classmates. And well, will this haunt him? Will this make him question herohood? Will this make him question himself being in hero society? Well, we don't know. And that will come up in the next part. Izuku Midoriya, now back at home with his mother, begins contemplating everything that he's seen. A friend of his dies, and well, a good chance anybody else could be hurt as well. But what is in his mind right now is that he could have been fast enough to stop it. He could have been strong enough to prevent his friend from perishing, and well, anybody from perishing, in matter of fact. But what restricts him? These hero laws. These laws that say that you can't use your quirk out in public unless you have this or that or this. You need a license for this and a license for that, and Izuku couldn't do anything in general. One day then arrives. All Might and Aizawa arrive at Izuku's home to speak with his mother and him about, well, going into dorms. And Izuku listens to all of this, but the thing is, he's not so sure about this anymore. He doesn't want to deal with this anymore. He's tired of all of it. Tired of, well, what he's been seeing. And he tells his mother this, and Izuku says that he feels that Yue isn't for him. Maybe not. Maybe in the future, maybe never. And Izuku makes his decision and walks to his room. Aizawa and All Might are in complete and utter shock. Even his mother is. They both nod and say that if he changes his mind that they're one call away, and they leave. His mother enters his room and asks what's wrong, and Izuku explains everything that happened and that this is, well, total bullshit. His mother says mind his language, but Izuku continues on. You don't understand. You didn't see what I saw. Someone dead at another villain's feet. My own friend, classmate. It's ridiculous. I couldn't do anything to stop it. And you want to know why? Because I'm all hawked up on this idea that I can't do certain things unless I get permission from a hero. Unless I have a stupid card to tell me otherwise. Izuku gets frustrated and his whole house begins to shake. And he stops. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm not mad at you by any means. I'm just frustrated. That's it. His mom says that she understands and that she'll make some food and maybe they'll talk over about it after dinner. So that all occurs, but Izuku doesn't really care. He doesn't mind the fact that he doesn't need to go to a hero school anymore. He's over it. Not over being a hero, but over this whole society's, well, boundaries and lines that you can't cross. He finds it ridiculous. He finds that a villain will cross any line to hurt somebody, but a hero cannot do the same. A hero cannot push every boundary to make sure someone is safe. Well, Izuku disagrees with this, and Izuku will make that very apparent. In his room all night, he begins working on something, changing his hero outfit more and more to a black outfit with a mask and, well, eye sockets that will cover his eyes and pupils, and actually covers his hair as well. His outfit is built around, well, a comic book he saw before, a comic book, well, by the name of The Flash. But this is different. He carries a giant black suit and his eyes seem to be, well, static. The suit is completely black and it seems like the mouth part of it is, well, tied up as if it has a threaded needle through it. This outfit is very reminiscent to a villain that, well, the Flash went up against by the name of Zoom. But he's no villain. He just wants to make sure that he has no remnants of his old, well, suit. Make sure that he can't be traced back to, well, anything he does that will get him in trouble. Izuku Midoriya then decides he'll go to a regular high school and save people, well, on his own 2 feet and under his own fruition. Izuku Midoriya refuses to just let these, well, heroes decide whether or not he can help people. Just like that day that he dashed into the sludge villain to save Amora. He wants to save everybody without a thought, without a second thought at all. And when you need a license, and when you need permission to save somebody, that is not true hero work. That is a monopolized idea of what hero society is. And Izuku Midoriya, over the next couple weeks, begins doing just that. Dashing in and out of certain scenarios, saving people, and while fighting for the greater good. and his name began to get out there very quickly. It seems like this black blur would just fly by, take out villains, not kill them, but then save people. And then immediately he would leave once again. His outfit resembled more of a villain, but the actions were ones of a hero. Izuku Midoriya would make sure that everybody he can see would be saved. Everybody that he could possibly help, he would help. Eventually, one day then arrived where he may have been outclassed, or at least that's what he thought in the beginning. All Might and All For One were at their final whims, ready for their final encounter, their final battle. He watched on from, a rooftop, watching as All Might and All For One begin clashing back and forth. These two titans, did not know when to stop, did not know when to quit. Eventually, All For One was ready to finish off All Might. All Might lost most of his power and it was practically done. But Izuku stood on top of that building and realized he could do something, even for the symbol of peace. He made his body, slowly but surely recover. All Might can feel that his body began to recover, as if the tension within his body began to subside slowly but surely. And for All For One, when All Might went to go give the final blow, he was frozen in place. It was as if All For One could not move, and All For One would be defeated here and now. But when All Might lands the blow, Izuku is running back and forth with the idea of finishing him off. Izuku could make, the friction in his lungs completely stop. More or less, making it so there is no way air will get within All For One. He will no longer be able to breathe. So should he do it? Izuku is, tempted with the idea, but decides not to. The man is defeated. There's no reason to, put him out of his misery, or maybe there is. Izuku leaves and keeps on with his, daily routine of saving, going to school, a regular school, of matter of fact, and he just continues on and on. That's until he gets a call. He answers, and the person, his good friend Amora, says that she knows. What are you talking about? Amora, I'm in school, I can't. She cuts him off and says that she knows that he is that person. The person that has been, running around and saving people from villains and defeating various villains as well. He tells Amora that that's ridiculous. He hasn't been, doing hero work in forever. Why would he be? He's done with it. He doesn't want to anymore. It's not for him, I guess. Amora says that is BS. That is just ridiculous. It's not what Izuku would truly want, and she knows from experience. Izuku saved her that day. Izuku was the reason why she wasn't hurt in that sludge villain attack. She knows that the heart of a hero is still within him, and says that she's outside, that she wants to speak with him in person. Izuku shakes his head and opens his door, and Amora is standing there waiting and walks in. They begin talking about everything, and Izuku explains that yes, it's him, but she can't tell anybody about this, that it's just his secret. And she says that why would she? There's no reason, that she owes him a favor anyways. So the conversation goes relatively okay, and Izuku just goes on to the next thing that he wants to do. He's trying to keep up, save people, but he's been running out of ideas, running out of people to save, running out of people to help. Eventually, he more or less just goes into a agency. He doesn't know what agency, but he begins looking for other tasks to execute, eventually finding something interesting. He's heard about this person. Not much about him, but some things. And his name is, Overhaul. The leader of the Shiaha Zaikai is, a major problem in this city, in this country. And, Izuku wants to shut it down. Bring it all to an ultimate stop. So he begins running around, trying to find any evidence of Overhaul himself, eventually finding something odd. hearing a little girl running out from an alleyway. He sees another hero there, but it seems that this hero refuses to take action, at least at this moment. So Izuku drops down right behind the leader of the Shiha Zaikai, Overhaul. In his black suit, fear began to, overtake nobody. They're not afraid of him. The hero that's in front of him is Mirio Togata, and the person by the name of Overhaul fears practically nothing. He actually smirks at the idea that this, figure is here. You know, if I'm here, that means that, your end is now. Come on, I know you don't kill. It's not your thing, right? Oh, this is rich. I can't believe you showed up. Hunting me? That sounds ridiculous. Overhaul is laughing at this while Eri is scared, and Izuku decides to wave toward Mirio to get the girl out of there. But Mirio doesn't do anything, and Izuku begins to get pissed. He activates his quirk on Mirio and Eri, and they begin sliding down the street. He looks at Mirio and, nods. Mirio realizes that what he wants him to do, and he takes Eri out of there. Obviously Izuku turns off his friction quirk, at least toward Eri and Mirio, but now it's time to fight the big bad boss. We're talking about Overhaul himself. This isn't going to be as easy as it seems. The fight begins and they're evenly matched. The speed advantage obviously goes to Izuku, but Izuku is already slightly tired out just from doing everything all the time. We've seen in, the canon of My Hero Academia that Izuku with One For All and, him scouring as a vigilante eventually tires the kid out. And frankly, Izuku is in that same boat. This Izuku is in the same boat. And he goes back and forth with Overhaul. But Izuku realizes that he's not getting anywhere with this. This is an actual battle. He's not sitting on a rooftop assisting somebody. This is something he needs to take very, very serious. He begins to attack Overhaul lightning fast, kicking him into the wall, but even Overhaul is not as much fazed by this. Izuku realizes that he needs to pull out all the stops, but can his body currently handle that? He's not so sure. He stops Overhaul in his tracks using his friction manipulation, making it so that he can't move. He lands multiple blows on Overhaul, trying to also dodge the attacks Overhaul sends at him, from spikes to even Overhaul trying to touch him, and once he does, it would be over. But luckily Izuku's too fast to get touched, and he's able to keep up. But the durability of Overhaul is insane, and not only that, it seems that reinforcements could come at any time. And these reinforcements do come. But when they arrive, luckily they're combated with Mirio, Night-Eye, and various other heroes, and they all look at Izuku, not necessarily knowing it's him, some of them obviously having a hunch, but not knowing for sure. They all fight against, Overhaul's lackeys as Izuku continues his fight. Eventually, Izuku decides that, beating him is more important than keeping him alive. He begins to, manipulate the air within Overhaul's lungs, and it begins to stop, forcing him to, try and gasp for air, but eventually Overhaul passes out. Izuku stops it and thinks that there's a good chance he'll die. His lungs adjusting to the lack of air and then readjusting to, air being fulfilled within it could lead to shock, lead to his body just malfunctioning more or less and dying. But for someone like him, he deserves it. Izuku runs out at full speed and begins knocking out the rest of the people that are there, and he stands in front of all the heroes in his black suit. He may look like a villain, but he's far from one, and Mirio even knows this. He stands in front of them as Aizawa activates his quirk to cancel it. Now Izuku is stuck. What will he do now? They approach him with the police, and so does Night-Eye, and they begin talking to him. So you're him. The black figure, huh? The suit is very nice, kid. But we all know who you are. And unfortunately, when you do things, Izuku cuts him off. I don't care if you know who I am. That's not what matters here. You all don't realize that this needed to be done. There were people getting hurt because of your laziness, because of the fact that, well, heroes weren't allowed to do this or that because of a freaking piece of paper. Now, tell me, if I have the power to save somebody, but I don't use it, doesn't that make me just as bad as them? And Night Eye is shocked to hear this, and Aizawa uncancels his quirk, and he asks Aizawa what he's doing, and he says that the kid's not gonna run. You're correct, Aizawa-sensei. I have no plan on running. I do have a plan to protest whatever you have going on, but if that leads to me getting thrown in prison, that's fine as well. Izuku puts out his hands, and one of the police officers go to cuff him, but, well, Night Eye pushes him away. Don't cuff the kid. I want to listen to what he has to say. Izuku begins to explain that he was there at Hosu City when he watched his own friend get stabbed in the back. It felt like centuries have passed. It felt as if there was, well, a lack of heroes, ironically enough. Why would there be a lack of heroes? There's a society that was monopolized around him. Oh, well, maybe because, well, I don't know. If you don't get paid as much, you don't care as much. Maybe if I was able to fight people without a card, maybe I could have helped them. But it doesn't seem that way. It seems like I'm forced into a situation where I have to choose to be, well, a good hero or a good citizen. Now, which one is it? Do I abide by the law or be a good hero? Night Eye nods and acknowledges what he's saying, but says that they tried this whole superhero thing, this vigilante thing a long time ago, and didn't work. Izuku says that he understands that, but this is different. This is ridiculous. This isn't a society of heroes. This is a company of heroes. This is people, well, that get paid to be a hero. Now, what is that, Night Eye? Tell me. I know who you are. You are one fantastic hero, and I'm sure you could donate your whole paycheck and you wouldn't blink an eye. But you think that's the same for every other hero? Truly. No, kid, I don't. And I understand what you're saying. The police cuff him without Night Eye saying anything more, and Night Eye tries to argue, but they don't listen. They're quirk canceling cuffs, and he's pulled away. Izuku Midoriya is going to be taken to prison. Aizawa tries to argue this, but the police aren't having it. The police captain isn't having it, and frankly, some of the heroes aren't having it. So he's taken away and put in a jail cell. Once again, he's approached by, well, Nezu and Aizawa, saying that if he comes back, well, he can get out of here. But Izuku just smiles. And do what, exactly? Stand by and watch? Again? You don't realize that this will consistently be bad for the society. Consistently, well, consistently we'll find out why these villains are having the upper hand. Izuku just shakes his head. Look, if I wanted to get out of here, I would have been gone a long time ago. It seems those quirk canceling cuffs don't even work on me. Same thing with Aizawa's quirk. But out of respect for you all, I wouldn't do that. I'm no villain. I hope you all realize that. Aizawa says that he's known that for a long time. Well, it's been pretty blatantly obvious. And he says that he could get out, he just has to, but Izuku shakes his head and says that this is his way of making a statement. When he gets out, he hopes that this society is better, more fit to actually save people. Izuku smiles and says that he hopes that it's sooner rather than later, so he doesn't have to miss his prime years of being a hero. But it's really up to what society truly wants, correct? Izuku just keeps reading his book, as well Nezu and Aizawa see that they can't convince him otherwise. They leave, and Izuku is stuck in prison, at least for the time being. Lots of time passes. Various events occur, and well, the war begins. This war that Izuku had no, well, part of. He didn't know it was happening, but he heard about it. The prison break began, and Izuku began to see this unlawful and, well, completely underrepresented hero society. Just as he thought, this would happen. There's not enough heroes to really maintain every villain, and, well, they just lack manpower. They lack so many things. They lack, well, the ability to stop these villains. He's not saying that he wants them dead, but damn near, well, close. Izuku finally escapes prison, well, kind of because it's blown in half, and while nobody else is there to stop him, he walks out, dashes to his home, seeing that it's completely in ruins. Underneath all the rubble, he finds his suit. He grabs it, puts it on, and he realizes that, well, hero society is now at the shackles of villains. And now it's time for him to step up. He's been talking about it for a while, and he says that a real hero will step up when everybody is in need, even when he doesn't have the means to do so. Society cannot restrict Izuku now. Law is not in place, and, well, he'll take every measure possible to make sure everybody will be safe. But that's for another story. Will Izuku Midoriya make sure everyone's safe, or will he die trying?